Welcome back to Notes, everybody. This is 12-5. Even though it's a new test, it's a continuation of the unit of invertebrates, so it's all going to still be with a 12 in the front. So this is the fifth section of invertebrates, the first section for this new test. Alright, we are going to be dealing with the next phylum called Nematoda. Nematodes are also referred to as roundworms due to the fact that the last group that we looked at, Platyhelminthes, were flat. So if we look at them in cross-section, they're flat. These guys are, hey, get this, round. So these guys are slender, so they're very thin, unsegmented worms, so they're smooth throughout their whole body, and they have tapering ends. If we look at both ends, they're kind of pointy, is what that means. They live in a wide variety of habitats. They can live in the soil, they can live in water, and they can even be parasitic on other mammals. They have what's called a Pseudo Seelam. Pseudo means fake or false, and the coelom refers to the body cavity. So they don't have a true body cavity. They have something kind of halfway in between a flatworms and an earthworms, and so they call it a Pseudo Seelam. So a false body cavity. And their claim to fame, or what makes them so special, is that this is the first group of animals to have a mouth and an anus, not a mouth for an anus. So evolutionarily speaking, this is a huge step up in complexity. Alright, we're going to take a look at just roundworms in general as to how do they do stuff. So for feeding, respiration, circulation, excretion. So it kind of goes through all of these. Feeding. There are some that are predators, and so they like to eat other things, and as you could tell from the mouth on this one here that they have grasping mouth parts that are able to tear bits of flesh off of whatever their prey happens to be. But also remember, their mouth is really, really tiny, so it's not like he's going to take a chunk off your arm or anything. Some of them, though, they like to eat smaller things like algae, so we got some herbivores. Fungi or fungivores, decaying organic matter, so they're kind of like decomposers. So they have a wide range of eating habitats. For, let's see, this is for respiration. They use diffusion because, again, their bodies are pretty small in terms of diameter. As you can see here, this is just centimeters. 3 centimeters is maybe about that big. So they're fairly small in diameter, so they can rely on diffusion for getting oxygen in and CO2 out, and also for excretion to get rid of any waste. Now, remember, they do have an anus, so any solid waste produced by eating is going to be excreted out their anus. But if it's chemical waste, or like metabolic waste, like ammonias or nitrates, then that can just be excreted through their skin with diffusion. As for circulation, let me check something real quick. Yeah, that's weird. It says circulation, but there's no circulation here. It's just body movement. They have what is called a hydrostatic skeleton. Hydro, water, and static refers to movement. They have a hydrostatic skeleton. It's basically like those water weenies I was talking about, that if you squish one side, that causes fluid to flow in the other, and so if you just keep squishing it back and forth, that causes movement of fluids. And so that's how they do it, just by moving around, that causes enough movement of their fluids. The response system, they have a very simple nervous system with several ganglia. Ganglia are clusters of nerve cells, and so they're like mini brains. If you think about it, they're kind of like mini brains. Okay, not full complex brains like ours, but they're like little mini brains. And so they have several ganglia down the length of their whole entire body. They have several different types of sense organs that can detect things like chemicals, so they can pick that up through their skin. They can detect when prey is nearby, or they can, if they want to dive into some animal to become their parasite, they can kind of smell that by the chemicals they give off too, and so they can go, oh hey, there's something I need to go crawl up inside. So, but you don't really see any eyeballs, you don't see feelers or anything like that. So very simple nervous system. For movement, they have hydrostatic skeleton, like I mentioned before. So remember, they also use that for circulation. And so they have 2 layers of muscles. And so if this is my worm here, he's got a layer of muscles that kind of goes in a circle around the worm, and then he's got a layer that does, you know, like this, that goes around like that. And so by alternating the contraction of the long muscles and the circular muscles, that causes them to be able to move pretty much in any direction they want. Some of them, especially the ones that live in the soil, they just kind of freakishly contract these muscles and they just kind of, you know, spaz out, and that just causes them to be whipped all around, and so they can go crazy. So lots of different movements depending on the type of one we're looking at. Here's a big old bowl of them. I thought it looked like a bowl of spaghetti. Enjoy your dinner tonight. For reproduction, they can reproduce sexually. They have separate sexes in some, although some can be hermaphroditic, but most of them are what's called dioecious, which means that they have two sexes, a male and a female. They do internal fertilization, which means the sperm is implanted directly into the female. And worms, in terms of reproduction, they have to have a couple of different hosts, meaning to do their life cycle and to reproduce, they have to go into a snail, a copepod, a human, a cow, whatever. But they have to, in order to reproduce fully, they have to be able to go through these different organisms. So here is one right here. This is a guy. We could tell because he's got the big long testis in there. He's got, here's one of the mini brains, a nerve ganglion right there. Here's his little mouth. And that goes into his pharynx, which is all this red stuff right here. And then you can't see it, but they're the kind of like this green behind is the intestines. You also have this light blue right here, which is, it's kind of hard to see. Don't have that one labeled. But you see these wires, or it kind of looks like a wire going that way and one going that way. He has the little nerve cords. He has two little nerve cords that run down the length of his body. He's got an excretory tube, and so that's just a little tube to excrete waste. His intestine down below that, and then if you go farther down, there's the anus. So this is just all tail right there. Now, most of the worms, there's not like the other guys where we had a phylum and like 3 or 4 different classes with different types of organisms. These guys, there's lots of different classes, so we just kind of look at what type of worm they are and what kind of diseases they cause. So on this one, you're only going to have to know the basics behind the disease-causing worms. So the first one, pretty important one, is called Trichinella. That's a Trichinella worm right there. And what he does is the grown-ups, they like to hang out inside of the intestines of their host, which is like a human. The females will burrow into your intestinal wall and release some eggs. The eggs hatch and turn into larvae, little babies, and the little babies will travel through your blood system and infect other organs like your lungs, your liver, and even into your brain. Sometimes when they get in your brain, they form a cyst. A cyst is like a little protective pocket that they live inside. So he's in here all curled up like that. And he just chills and waits until the time is right, and he pops open. There's been surgeries where they take out these cysts out of people's heads, and they're like the size of a cantaloupe. It's disgusting. Okay, so that is Trichinella. Usually you get this from eating pork. So Jewish people don't have to worry about that. Yay. Another one is called a filarial worm. So that word right there, filarial. These are little thread-like worms that live in the blood and lymph vessels of birds and mammals. And their main transmitter is a mosquito. So they'll be living inside of a mosquito. A mosquito bites you, and then this little guy right here will swim off through his saliva into your body. And then where they make their way into your blood vessels or your lymphatic vessels, and they start to reproduce and grow like crazy. Well, if you get too many worms that block up your lymphatic system, you get swelling. As you look at this person's leg compared to this one, you can see it's much, much larger than the other. And so you get a disorder called elephantiasis. Not to be confused with elephantitis, which is not a real condition. It's just what most people think it's called. So it's elephantiasis, and it's caused by a blockage of lymphatic vessels. And it can affect your hands, it can affect your feet, your legs, and yes, even in the case of some poor male, it can affect your testicles. Not good. All right, other disease-causing worms. We have the Ascarid worm. This one is very important because scientists have done a whole bunch of interesting studies on this guy I'll talk about in a second. So Ascaris lumbricoides is the genus and species name of this guy. And what he does is he gets inside of your intestines and, like a tapeworm, sucks up all your nutrients. And so you end up becoming malnourished because you're not getting any of your food. The adults live in your intestine, release eggs, which get passed in the feces. And in different parts of the world, people just kind of cop a squat and poop wherever they want. So feces are everywhere. The contaminated food, so some of this feces might wash into agricultural land, and so the lettuce and the other foods can get contaminated. And so you eat a salad that has a little larva inside, and that burrows into your intestinal wall, gets into your vascular system, where it eventually ends up in your lungs. Then they tickle in your lungs and start working their way up your trachea, where you cough and swallow, and that gets the worm back into your intestinal system and starts the process all over again. Nasty. Oh, hey, look, here's some worms now. Here's a pig intestine that they cut open, and if you notice, all of those little stringy things, those are all the Ascaris lumbricoides worm. Here's looks like a stomach. There's a lung right there, so that looks like a stomach. They cut it open, and look at all those yummy worms. Nice. Some more worms, hookworms. These are ones that dogs and cats get quite easily, so named for the little hook on the end there. Hookworms, they tend to live and hatch in the soil, and people walk around barefoot, and then these little worms wait for someone to stand for a little while, and they just burrow right up inside of your foot. Then they get into your arteries and veins, where they travel to the lungs, where again you cough them up, you swallow them, they end up in your intestines. Once they're in your intestines, they cause weakness and poor growth due to the fact that they're sucking all your blood cells away, and your blood is what helps to carry nutrients around your body. So lots of these nasty worms are found pretty much everywhere, but thankfully in North America we don't have to deal with that as much. Alright, so there's your lesson on disease-causing worms and all their nasty little habits. So next up is segmented worms, earthworms, and those guys are cute and we like them. Okay, talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.